Hello. So today I'm going to talk about a newish program, a collaborative program across multiple jurisdictions and stakeholders to put together a funding source and a pooling mechanism to do science for a sector of our work that is really important to have a science feedback mechanism on it. And so we call this program the SAM program. It's the Stormwater Action Monitoring. And I work at Ecology, but I'm really working on behalf of this program, trying to put this program together. We're only about 3 years old at this point. Got started with this last permit reissuance. I would really like a show of hands how many people know about the stormwater permits. Okay, so we know about it. They're about a half-inch thick. There's a lot of requirements in them, a lot of source control and illicit connection, a lot of low-impact development, a lot of different topics in there. And this program is intended to produce science on the permit to figure out how well the permit's working. And so I'll just get started. So about SAM, I alluded to the fact that it's collaborative. Back when we issued the 2007, Ecology issued the 2007 permits, there was monitoring requirement as NPDES permits need to have, but it was only for Phase 1 communities. And Phase 1 communities are the largest communities, so Seattle, Tacoma, the ports, and King County, Pierce County, Clark County. Everybody else is a Phase 2 that has a stormwater permit, but that doesn't mean every municipality has a stormwater permit. They have to have a certain size of population. And so at that time, the board ruled that Ecology needed to include monitoring requirements in the Phase 2 permits on the next permit cycle. And so Ecology was asked by the Phase 2 communities to not follow the traditional approach. A traditional approach for monitoring in a permit is to monitor the outfall and just see how well you're doing and measure against a benchmark or a criteria. But for stormwater, we developed our neighborhoods years ago, decades ago, hundreds of years ago, without stormwater controls. And so there's all kinds of inputs. Stormwater's outfalls are everywhere. And so we can't monitor all those outfalls. And so we needed a collaborative, a regional approach to begin to investigate stormwater science and how well, what the effectiveness is. So far, we have funding, a collaborative funding model from 90 permittees, including DOT, lots of in-kind from state agencies and from businesses, and hundreds and hundreds of volunteers. And the goal, as I've mentioned and alluded to already, is to really measure the effectiveness of these permits and these manuals and these BMPs that we're trying to retrofit the landscape with and control stormwater. So one of the questions we have in our permits is how much do you spend on your stormwater program? And when we add that up across Western Washington, municipalities are spending a lot of money. And monitoring is really needed to know, we need to know if it's working. And we'd like to know that at the regional scale. We'd like to inform the legislature about how well this is going. So SAM represents about a 1% investment for monitoring feedback. The framework is broken into 3 kind of topical areas, categories, and that's effectiveness studies, basically effectiveness of management actions. So it might be something like street sweeping, but it might also be, how well is a certain BMP working, or how well is a collection of BMPs working at the watershed scale. And then source identification is kind of like business source control work, where a permittee might go into business sectors across their city and ask about barriers or how many BMPs they put in place. Do they have spill kits? Or they might do smoke or dye tests to look for illicit connections. And then our receiving water component is we chose some environments where we could hopefully track stormwater impact, and as these permits mature, which are we going to be able to track a difference in these sensitive environments? And I'll move move on to show you some of our projects. So we're, like I said, we're about 3.5, 4 years old at this point. We have about 20, 25 projects, contracts that I've let out. And so it's not that I have a ton of findings to present today. I just want to provide this overview of this novel program. So as I mentioned, I work at Ecology. Ecology was asked to manage this program. So what we do is we invoice permittees based on their decision to participate or not. And then we manage the contracts. We coordinate for reviews of deliverables like technical advisory committees. I produce quarterly and annual reports like a fund, where the money's going, what projects are, how many projects are being contracted right now. And then I put all of the contracts, the scope of work, the deliverables online so that all of the 90-something permittees that essentially bought this program can track a project, their favorite project, and they can see how well it's going. And then Ecology said, we're not going to do this if you don't provide oversight, because it's a huge risk, right, for a regulatory agency to do this. And so the Stormwater Work Group, which is the stakeholder committee that kind of dreamed up this idea and put this together it took like a decade to put this framework together. They oversee Ecology's performance in this of running SAM. So if you remember back those 3 icons, I talked about the categories that we look at. I just want to give you a flavor of the topics that we're tackling right now. Source control, as I mentioned, is a real big one. We'd like to find the sources on the landscape. And we have 2 projects that are looking at business inspection effectiveness. And if I have a little red asterisk on there, the project's just finishing up, and so there should be some results soon. So we have, then we have another project on IDDE, kind of what do, because at a regional scale, we want to amass this information of what are jurisdictions facing out there in their IDDE programs. And we want to know what the problems are, like car spills or things like that. Do they have enough resources available to like replenish spill kits, things like that? Because maybe there's a state role, maybe there's one jurisdiction has a really advanced and mature program and another jurisdiction's just getting started. So we want that kind of sharing to happen across the permittees. And stormwater operation and maintenance is really where stormwater management is at, and it's not a real sexy topic for science, but it's really the front line. Public Works spend a lot of money on operation and maintenance, and they want to know how frequently to do these sort of things. Like we have a catch basin cleaning requirement in our permit, but how frequently does that really need to be done? What are the determining factors to have a catch basin system, a stormwater system that isn't shedding a bunch of pollutant-bound contaminants? Okay, some of the other topics for our effectiveness studies. Oh, I forgot to mention that effectiveness studies is the biggest part of the program. It's over half the budget. So that's probably at $1.5 million a year on effectiveness studies. The other big topic is BMP retrofitting. BMP stands for Best Management Practice. It's stormwater lingo for an action you might do to try to do corrective action on like a treat stormwater flow. Like Ani talked about permeable pavement, that's a flow control BMP. We have a big manual, it's like really thick, on BMPs that we approve and you can use as you develop your landscape. We want to know how well, some of them are proprietary and some of them are presumptive, and we really would like to know about what's the effectiveness of the presumptive BMPs, like swales, rain gardens, things like that. Like how well do they really work? So those kinds of studies are going on. We developed, the Highways project is at Echo Lake in Seattle, and basically it's that classic 2-lane highway along a lake. When we add stormwater controls, is it going to help the discharge to the lake? Will the lake receive less, metals or oil? So that's that kind of project there where it's a site scale. Regional facilities are this other figure where there may have been a super undersized detention pond built in the 80s with some of our first stormwater controls. But the area around it has urbanized, and it's now severely overwhelmed. So how do we add more capacity to treat the stormwater of the new urbanizing area, and how effective is it? So that's that kind of project. The watershed scale project is it's really neat. Basically, what it is City of Redmond has kind of oh my God, I have 5 minutes, has a project where they're retrofitting the entire watershed for stormwater controls, and we're going to see how well it works. It's really the true litmus test of our stormwater permits. And then we have projects like low-impact development. You've probably heard this term, green infrastructure, bioretention, rain gardens. All those words aren't equal in Ecology's eyes. Some of them have more specification, like in the engineered soils, than others. So we do have one study, if you're familiar with NOAA or WSU Puyallup, Jennifer McIntyre's work, where we can filter stormwater, really pretty gross highway runoff stormwater, through the bioretention soil mix. It's just 60% sand, 40% compost, and we can prevent acute toxicity to salmon, to coho, eggs and adults. And so these are good results, and we want to use more bioretention across the landscape. And then the last category that I was going to talk about is our receiving water studies. And basically, this is just, everything else was about Western Washington, was paid into by permittees across Western Washington, but the receiving water studies are just paid for by Puget Sound draining permittees. And what they did is they chose 2 environments to track over time, and that would be the small lowland streams and the marine nearshore in the urban area. And the metrics are water quality, sediment quality, and biota. And we're just finishing up the trend, the very first time we've looked at it, and we're kind of refining our parameter lists, and we're trying to figure out frequencies on some of these to measure. And then the intent is to stick to a certain parameter list for trends. So the streams is 100 sites, and there's 2 strata, urban and not urban. And it's within the lowland ecoregions, so these aren't high gradient streams. And each site represents a kilometer. And we have a pretty large list of things we're looking at. We're looking at water quality, sediment quality, habitat, and BIBI and periphyton. In our nearshore environment, we only have 40 sites because we decided not to do the outside the urban area because the state has a larger program that can be leveraged for that. So we're just looking at the urban sites, and these are trends over time. The point is to watch, to see how if these improve, chemically and biotically as our permits mature. So we just, again, started the trend study, and we're just starting to refine the status effort into the trend study. And this is just, so these sites were chosen randomly, and this figure is to show you the random point is the star, and the 3 different programs were going to be bacteria sampling calf deep, but the Stormwater Work Group decided not to spend money on that one this time and do a compilation effort on data already collected. But the mussel site is down at 1 foot depth. It needs to be intertidal for mussels to live, and the sediment site's essentially at 1 fathom. And again, our nearshore component has water quality, sediment quality, and biota. These are all led by different groups, by King County, by DFW, by USGS. Our partnership is pretty broad at this point. And so then the next steps for this program, as I said, it's kind of a fledgling program, and we are going to carry it forward. The recommendation was it's going well. Let's keep this going, carry it into the next permit cycle. And one of the things that I'm trying to do is reach out to folks like you and improve our communications that there is an active comprehensive stormwater monitoring effort going on now. We're developing some fact sheets for our first studies that are wrapping up, and we just finished a YouTube video about SAM. They should be available really soon. And then as these first studies finish up, we of course want to apply the findings to our next set of data gaps or topics for future study. And then the last thing I wanted to say was that the feedback is that this is really useful to the permittees themselves because it's essentially a scientific program based on requirements in a permit. And so they learn about these findings together, they fund them together, they can use the information. Our communication materials are written to inform the council who may not be, aware of all the requirements in the permits. And we also want to inform the legislature about the amount of work that it takes to do this kind of work. And permittees can be involved in multiple ways. Many just sit on tax. Others come to meetings and continue to shape the program. And that's about it. One thing I want to tell you is Ecology is changing its website, and so if you have bookmarks over this winter, you may find those break. If you can somehow get to Ecology's main page, you can just query in the search box for Sam if you're interested in this program.
Are the data you're collecting going to be available on the web?
Absolutely. The data are going to be available. Some of the data, if they're receiving water nature data, they'll be in EIM, which is Ecology's database. Some of the BMP data will go to the International BMP database. But each project will have its final deliverables available somehow. Like big access databases, I'm not really sure if they'll be online. You may just need to ask, but I'll put reports online.
And are the water quality data also paired with flow data for the streams?
So we didn't have the budget for flow this time, but we are hearing loud and clear that that is something that really should be done. And we may not do full discharge, we may do stage. Yeah.
How about artificial filters for PBDs, for petroleum-based derivatives?
So
do they exist?
There are a number of proprietary BMPs to take out organics. I don't know what the body of research is on flame retardants, but we do have one study that's looking at the bioretention soil mix to reduce PCBs.
Well, that'll do it, but talk about artificial replaceable filters in storm drains for petroleum-based derivatives, which are a major cause of pollution. Big study in the East Coast on Delmarva Peninsula years ago. It seems to me that there was something coming along in the way of replaceable filters for storm drains for PBDs.
Yeah, the world of stormwater and stormwater BMP research is really large. It really is. There's conferences and products and companies and startups, and there really is an active research component.
Well, somebody should put some in some storm drains to see how they work. And that's not happening locally, as far as you know, however. Right?
No, I can't imagine that that's a preferred approach at this point. Not knowing exactly how. So one of the things that we learned, like from the surveys, is crashes and spills are actually a widespread topic that each jurisdiction has to deal with on a routine basis. And what's hard about it is, they got to start with mapping to figure out where that would go if it enters the storm drain. And then you have to deal with treatment. And ephemeral crashes on the road and things like that are really hard to plan for, so you wouldn't necessarily buy a BMP for every catch drain just in case that happens.
It'd have to be in major drains is where you'd have them, and then you replace them regularly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question just about the SAM program. Is anyone up here a partner in that, and what's the benefit of being a partner in it?
So yes, both Whatcom County and the City of Bellingham are permittees, and they opted into the SAM program, so they're part of it. And that means their funds go. And then the City of Bellingham is actually leading one of our projects right now, which is to verify the flow control capacity of bioretention. Is it the same as what the model says it is when it's actually built in the ground in a construction site and, got installed, and whether or not it's the same size and whether it performs like the model. It's a big verification study. It's a great study. So yeah. And then the benefits is this. It's everybody's going to learn about it across Puget Sound and Western Washington all at the same time. We're going to have this body of science to help inform public works and the permits and the manuals together. Thanks.
Thank you, Brandi.